first started writing, I had a Wurlitzer, you know, in my bedroom. That's basically how I used to write all my stuff. When I got to Lincoln University, when I got to college, there were lots of pianos around, a lot of acoustic pianos. So I began to write more on acoustic pianos, and I really got to love the idea of writing on acoustic pianos. The only thing is, like when I was writing, you basically had to. I feel like I must have been like Beethoven or something, because you know you couldn't really hear the stuff that you were composing. You know, you just had to hear it in your head. So I kind of understand how even if he was deaf, you know, he could still write, because in the old days, you know, like you basically had to kind of musically visualize everything anyway. Like if I was going to do a string part, I would just have to visualize like what the strings were going to sound like. I didn't know. So I always longed for the day when I would be able to write music with the sounds that I was actually going to use. But that didn't come along until way later. So I'd have to say that at the beginning of my writing career, I was using the piano. And then we would just go into the studio and experiment with things. Then the Fender Rhodes came along. The sound of the Fender Rhodes by itself is so magical. So for instance, if you just play this, and then you throw that on, already you can kind of get an intimation of what something would sound like orchestrally. So that was my go-to instrument until this guy came along, and then I could hear like what kind of Minimoog. And it was like the first commercially available synthesizer. So I went out and got me one. The first thing I wanted to do with it was bend a note. I always, like, as a keyboard player, the thing that I always wanted to do was be able to bend a note, like, you know, and then I saw this pitch wheel on it, and it was like, you know, and I was like in heaven. So, because no other keyboard could actually do that. So that was my basic process. So I started out as a pianist, writing everything on piano. And it was about 1976 when head of our record company, Ayers Records, Clive Davis, put us in a studio with a room full of synthesizers, a room about maybe half this size, full of synthesizers, modular synthesizers that were all connected together to be able to create some type of polyphony, but you know, more so than that, just the idea of being able to mix waveforms. We were trying to work on tracks, and it just didn't, you know, it wasn't clicking. And at some point, when the bass player went home for the night, I just jumped on the synthesizer and I started coming up with, trying to come up with some ideas that I could give him for the next day. And that's when I realized that I could actually do them myself. And speaking of bass players, so after we recorded these albums, you know, we would go out on the road, and of course, I would be playing keys, you know, and so we would actually need like a real bass player. Bass players hate me. They really, really hate me. You
Put
know,
them out of work.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because like they had to kind of duplicate all those sounds. I found some great guys who could do that, though.
Who writes on the piano here?
A lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so let me ask you then. Do you start out with the chord, you know, with a chord changes in mind? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. Interestingly enough, I used to do that, but now that they, you know, now with all of the different rhythms, you know, the drum rhythms that you can put, lately I start with a rhythm, like with a drum beat, and then I'll try to put a bass line on it. And then I'll try to put the chords over it. Because you know why? Because sometimes if I have no chords in mind and I hear the bass, then I can try out anything, you know, and see, and sometimes it actually fits. But if I start with chords, then they're already dictating to me what the bass will be. Not necessarily though, because you can start out with some changes that you think the root is this, and then you can go and just change the root totally, and it's something else. So I guess, you know, that's
interesting. That's how you're working now, though. Say I wanted to make a track, but I've never touched this instrument before. If I have some previous, you know, training on piano, what do I need to know about this in terms of how to approach this?
All right, that's a fair question. So, Rhodes, right? That's Rhodes. Now, you flip this switch right here. That's all you need to know.
That's just a
That's all you need
switch?
to know. You just got to flip that switch.
Yeah.
Whatever you played before becomes magic.
It's that simple.
It's that simple.
Emotionally, then, what do you think? Like, you described it as orchestral, but like emotionally, how would you articulate what this sound gives you?
Oh, wow. I've thought for many years about that. Maybe some of you can help me. But for me, first of all, it's the actual physical movement of the air back and forth, isn't it? You know? I mean, here you have these two speakers here and these two speakers in the back, okay? And they're actually pushing the movement of the air. They're pushing it back and forth like this. So you've got to be caught up in that. It's like a whirlwind almost. And then there's this like kind of the psychoacoustical effect that you get from being in the midst of that. Because now you're not just hearing music, you're feeling it, you're inside of it. It's almost like experiencing a waterfall.
It's funny though, because like, okay, so we were walking out of the room upstairs, right, and we played the bottle, and part of the reason that song and that recording lives on, because it's not just the song that lives on, it's the recording itself and people sampling it or referencing it or using those two chords, you know, for house records, whatever it might be, is because it feels endless, or it feels like it's a waterfall, this continuous thing. You never want it to stop. So how did you come up with the chords?
I didn't, Gil wrote it.
Gil wrote it?
Yeah, Gil wrote it. I sat down, well,
but you manifested
his timing
it,
wasn't so great, so I sat down and played it. There is a slight difference, I guess, between, I would play a lot of the songs that, you know, that he would initially start on the piano. I'd modify them or arrange them, you know, but there are some songs that I'm listening to it and I'm like, okay, no. I'm not touching this. You know, we're leaving this just like it is. Yeah. And that was certainly one of them.
Say anybody in this room has a partner that they work with. Chiefly, you would supply the music and an idea of what the emotion was behind it, right? And he would realize it with some kind of lyric.
So our MO was kind of like this. From the beginning, from the first song that we ever wrote, which was a song called Toast to the People, we had just known each other maybe 5 minutes. And we had met in a music room because a friend of ours was doing a talent show. And then there was another song he was doing that was called Peace, Where Can a Man Find Peace? And it was a song that this young man had written who I'd never met. And when he came in the room and he played the song and our friend sang it, the lyrics just hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, here's a 19-year-old guy, you know, who is writing lyrics that sound like they were written by a fully grown man. How did I know? I was 17, but I didn't know what a fully grown man sounded like, but it just sounded very mature and very deep for me. And I thought, wow, I got all this music. And this guy got he's got a book full of poetry. And I thought, man, maybe he can write some stuff. So I asked him, he said, and this became kind of the way we wrote from this point on. He said, what were you thinking about when you wrote that song? What were you feeling? What is it that you were trying to express? If you can say it in words. And I said, well, I just said it in music. Why do I got to say it in words? He was, but you know, I thought it was a challenge. So I said, well, let me think about it for a second. I think when I was writing this song, I was thinking of, it's kind of a tribute to people who came before me, like musically, and freedom fighters, and people who fought for justice and for our ancestors, and you know, it's just like kind of a song it's about all of that. And so he said, play it again. I played it again. He took out a pen, and he started writing in his little orange notebook. And he said, one more time. And I played it again, and he finished writing some stuff, and then he gave it to Victor, our mutual friend. He said, can you do it one more time? So I did it again, and they were all huddled in the corner working on something. I could hear them singing some ideas and stuff. And then he came back, and he did this. This song was our first song. The first song we'd ever written, and was called "A Toast to the People," and we put it on our first album for a big label called Midnight Band, First Minute of a New Day. And that was our methodology from that point on. If I had a piece of music, I better know what the motivation was, you know, what the spiritual or mental motivation was for me to write that song, because he was going to ask me. And then he would take that and turn it into these incredible lyrics.
Everything's a product of its particular era and environment. It's funny because I feel like, you know, the stuff that you guys collaborated on and wrote, it's obviously an outgrowth of all of your experiences, having lived through the civil rights era, being in student activism, Black Power movement, and also this explosion, you know, of technology and just, you know, electrified music in general. But do you think, like, at the root of it, there was something that, I don't know, how do you sort of reconcile being a product of an era, but also having this yearning to express something? Because that's obviously something you guys wanted to express.
Yeah, because we were looking at the people who came before us. I mean, I really admired some of the songwriters they called from what they called Tin Pan Alley, the writers who wrote songs for Broadway plays, you know, and some of the chord changes they came up with were the ones that fueled the bebop era, for instance. You know, I have a theory about that, by the way. I'm not gonna. You want me to tell you really quickly? So I always wondered, why is it that Charlie Parker and and Dizzy and all of those guys, why are they playing this stuff? They could write their own music. You know, they could write their own chord changes. Why are they playing this stuff? And then all of a sudden, one day I was like, it hit me. I was like, well, maybe they were the ones who wrote those songs to begin with. Maybe some of the publishers bought those songs from them for nothing, put their names on it, and this was a way for them to expose their songs and their music and to do what they really wanted to do with it. It's just a theory, though. I have no evidence.
I'd actually like to know how you work after all these days of music making. Like, how do you, for example, collect ideas? What's your routine, if you are comfortable to share it?
I mean, I started out with a bunch of things that I didn't know and was constantly discovering them, you know, like a child, you know, like I was like, oh, I remember I was like a chord like, oh wow, what is that, you know? And then I would have to figure it out, or then I would come up with a, oh my God, you know? And then after a while, I mean, now 50 years later, it's not, you know, that's not that surprising to me anymore. So sometimes I want to get away from myself. I want to get so far away from myself so that I can write something different. Yeah. But it doesn't always happen. It's not, you know, it doesn't happen. I mean, I'm in a period in my life where I'm ready to like reach out to like other writers. The next project I do, I don't know if I'm actually going to write any songs, you know? What I think is the best way for me to work right now is for me to like deal with like seeds. Give me a seed and I'll go crazy, you know? But like all my seeds are old, you know? Or at least they're boring to me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why, hint, hint, you know, like I'm always open like to hearing new ways of thinking, because I don't think in new ways all the time as much as I'd like to. Yeah. You know? Like I feel like I always try to leave, oh gosh, you know, there are always going to be things that I can't do. Yeah. It's all about forgetting, right? I mean, once you learn things, you know, like at some point you have to forget it all. And I've spent a lot of time forgetting, you know. What you laughing about, man? But it's true. That's a quote. Maybe that'll be my tombstone, you know. I've spent a lifetime forgetting.
Do you have like a preferred scale that you work on? I mean, when you're working on, you know, composing and doing chord progressions, you have like, are you thinking, oh, I'm working in a minor pentatonic, or how does it work for you?
The answer is no. I don't I don't, half the time when I start to write something, I don't know what key it's in, you know, I don't know what chord it is or anything, you know, like I'm just gonna flop my fingers down on the, you know, on the keyboard and hope they don't fall in the same places that they always fall when I flop my fingers down on the keyboard, you know.
I want to ask you, because I listen that you have very beautiful harmonies and chord progressions, that if you have any influence from classical music, like composers like Claude Debussy that have already some amazing chord progressions, traveling through different tonalities.
Yeah.
And also, what do you think about like monochord music, like 70s Afrobeat and stuff like that? Because I see that this music is heavily built on harmony. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So groove is important, man. You know, I mean, we already talked about the chord changes and everything, and that's fine. But if you have chord changes and no groove, forget it. Doesn't matter what chord changes you have in there. So in a way, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of contradicting myself, am I? Because because I'm saying that groove is king. Groove is king. Damn, I mean, you know, like if it's not going to get you moving or if it's not going to stir you emotionally, if the rhythm is not doing that to you, it doesn't really matter what else you do, does it? So how I feel about monochord music, I'm good with it, man. I'm good with it as long as it keeps me moving, as long as it keeps me engaged emotionally, rhithmically somehow, you know.
And if you listen to like the band in its heyday, live in a live setting,
we used to do that.
There's like "Home Is Where the Hatred Is."
That's a perfect example on the live version of it.
The live version, and then there's
just on a D.
Yeah,
we're just on D minor. We're on D minor for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, just
you know?
like once you get out of the song part of it, and then it's just this extended jam. And these are the ones that were embraced not only by the audiences, but in like club settings as well. I know the live version of "Home Is Where the Hatred Is" was like I think a loft record, like a record that was played in New York by selected people at parties and whatnot.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
because it's a great dance record.
Yeah, and why is that? It's because of the groove.
Yeah, sampled by people for house records and whatnot as well.
Yeah,
so
it's about groove. It's all about groove. The other part of it is that jazz was so heavily in love, I mean, you know, with some of the classical, the 20th century classical composers, that if you like jazz, you're gonna have to like Ravel. You know, you're gonna have to like Debussy. My parents played music all the time. There was never a time in my house when there wasn't music playing unless the electricity was somehow off or something. If they weren't playing bebop, or the singers like Ella Fitzgerald or Sarah Vaughan or you know whatever, then they were playing classical European music, you know, in the breaks. A lot of Bach, who I say was the first jazz musician, you know, Beethoven. I mean, you know the standards, you know, yeah, the hits.
How do you navigate the business side of things versus composition? For example, making sure you're not getting ripped off for work you've done, but at the same time not compromising the creative process in the sessions.
Oh my God!
Because if you go in too gung-ho at the beginning,
did you get that? Because I can't even repeat it. I can't even make my mouth say that. This is something that I was never able to do when I was younger. I dare say that I probably am still not able to do it, but I've had to. You know, I understand now that this is a different time. When I was a young musician. There were always people who were willing to step in there and do it for you. And as a young person, you know, you didn't necessarily understand what their motivations were. You know, they certainly weren't to help you. And I mean, I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware. If you don't know the business, then you don't know how many ways there are to make music. And I mean, to make money. And as a musician in this day, you have to make a career of that. You have to actually make a career of finding out all the ways that there are to make money. And let's face it, I mean, music is a business. I mean, maybe it's a business that where the product is something that we really enjoy, that we love, that we feel emotionally connected to. But at the same time, we expect to eat off of it. You know, we expect to be able to live off of it. And nobody's going to do it for me, you know, so I have to devote some of the time that I might have ordinarily spent on writing a new piece of music or whatever, and getting online and, you know, and doing some things that have to be done.
Could you give us any advice on how to turn music into business? and still stay devoted to it. Well, I mean, and how to turn your music into business and still stay devoted to music.
Oh. Wow.
Fight's over.
Damn, girl. My short answer would be no. But maybe a little bit longer answer is, first of all, make sure that you love what you do. Make sure that before you put a product out, make sure that you like it. This is probably the most important thing. Don't ever do something and say, oh, I'm doing it because this group will like it, or this person will like it, or these people will like it, or this demographic will like it. Never do that.
Right.
You know, you cannot give a shit about that. And you know why? Because there are so many people who have done that and failed horribly. And there are just as many people who have not given a shit about that and been as successful as anybody, has ever been. So that's not a consideration. I mean, the playing field is kind of balanced for that. Okay? What you can do is you can take all of the influences of the music that you like, including the music that's popular. You know, listen to it, internalize it, and it's going to come out through you.
Can you take us out with something?
Okay, I'll do that one that I was starting to play before. It's called Nomad. Teach your mind to travel past the limits of its place. The greatest truth unravels where there is no limit space. Questions, there are many. Answers but a few. Remind your mind to mind your mind. There's always things to do. Remind your mind to mind your mind. Remind your mind to mind your mind.